Hello, everyone. This is Pastor Ryan Pronzinski of Christ Lutheran Church, and this is my Chair Chats daily devotion for Monday, May 11, 2020. Peace be with you. These video devotions are intended to help you engage your life of faith during this time of pandemic. And so with that in mind, I encourage you all to leave constructive comments, questions, or prayer requests in the comments section below, and I promise that I will get to those in future videos. I also encourage you to take time throughout this video to pause and reflect, have conversation with people around you, journal, or do whatever it is you need to do to truly kind of dig into this and take the time you need to think and ponder and hear what God might have to say to you today. The readings that get selected for these videos comes from the Daily Revised Common Lectionary, which is a church calendar schedule of readings, and it can be found online. The readings for today come from Psalm 102, verses 1 through 17, Exodus 13, verses 17 to 22, and Acts chapter 7, verses 17 through 40. Before I get to the first reading, as always, at Christ Lutheran Church, we have been live streaming our Sunday morning services, and we invite you to join us. Those services are live streamed at 9:45 a.m. Eastern Standard Time, and the link to our videos, either pre-recorded, or I should say posted after they've been recorded, can be found in the description below. So please click on that link and join us for worship on Sundays or whenever you can. All right, our first reading is from Psalm 102, verses 1 through 17, which reads as follows. Hear my prayer, O Lord. Let my cry come to you. Do not hide your face from me in the day of my distress. Incline your ear to me. Answer me speedily in the day when I call. For my days pass away like smoke, and my bones burn like a furnace. My heart is stricken and withered like grass. I am too wasted to eat my bread. Because of my loud groaning, my bones cling to my skin. I am like an owl of the wilderness, like an owl of the waste places. I lie awake. I am like a lonely bird on the housetop. All day long my enemies taunt me. Those who deride me use my name for a curse. For I eat ashes like bread and mingle tears with my drink. Because of your indignation and anger, for you have lifted me up and thrown me aside. My days are like an evening shadow, I wither away like grass. But you, O Lord, are enthroned forever. Your name endures to all generations. You will rise up and have compassion on Zion, for it is time to favor it. The appointed time has come. For your servants hold its stones dear, and have pity on its dust. The nations will fear the name of the Lord, and all the kings of the earth your glory. For the Lord will build up Zion. He will appear in his glory. He will regard the prayer of the destitute, and will not despise their prayer. Here ends the reading. As I finished reading this psalm and dwelled on its words a bit, and I needed to kind of ponder a little bit, I couldn't help but think that these words from the psalmist, they couldn't come at a better time, especially these specific verses. Hear them again. My heart is stricken and withered like grass. I am too wasted to eat my bread. My days are like an evening shadow. I wither away like grass. But you will rise up and have compassion on Zion. For it is time to favor it. The appointed time has come. So I was thinking to myself as I held these verses in mind, you, like me, might feel stricken right now. That is, according to the dictionary, afflicted or overwhelmed by disease, sorrow, or misfortune. This is the season of being stricken, is it not? What an appropriate word and feeling for the day. And because of feeling stricken, you, like the psalmist, might be losing your appetite for things. Be it literal food, like in the psalm, unable to eat his bread. Or maybe you're losing your appetite for the news, or sheltering in place, or social distancing, or all the sanitizing and hand washing, etc. And the days can all start to run together and feel feeble, right? Like dry grass in the sun, deficient and lacking vigor or strength. And on top of all of this, we have lost many of our markers of time. Many of our markers of time, right? Going to church on Sunday, going out to dinner with family and friends, monthly social gatherings and the like, annual trips to various locations, and most recently, no Easter celebrations, as usual anyway, or Mother's Day celebrations, as usual anyway. And so many of our seasonal markers of time have seemingly been stripped away from us. And when our markers are gone and time takes on less meaning as a consequence of losing these markers of time, life feels less full. No prom, no graduation. I just thought of those now too. When all these things seemingly get stripped away, life feels less full. It feels empty. It feels, dare I say, stricken. And so this is where we are right now, along with the psalmist. But please hear now how the psalmist, in faith, is a faith statement, concludes their prayer of lament, because this is a prayer of lament from the psalmist. Quote, "You will," that is God, "you will, God, rise up and have compassion on Zion," that is, on your people, God. "For it is time to favor it. The appointed time has come." So in other words, because you are our God of compassion, says the psalmist, and you rise above all that would bring us down. Now is the appointed time, amidst us being stricken and afflicted. Now is the season. Now is when God will mark our time, when all our markers are gone. Now is the time when God will mark our season of strickenness with God's favor and presence. So as we struggle to see our usual markers of the seasons of the time, our usual markers of celebration, the psalmist and God would have you remember that God is making a marker of favor for you right now. God is creating things to celebrate and remember, even during these hard times. And think about this as we are in the season of Easter still. Easter itself, our greatest celebration and marker of time, if you will, I believe so. Even Easter itself did not immediately start as a marker for celebration, but as a marker of lament and mourning. I think of poor Mary. "If you know where they have taken my Lord and laid him, please tell me," in tears streaming down her face. Right? They were all sad, locked away like us, wondering what the heck was going on. And it wasn't until they saw the marker of resurrection that God created amidst their sorrow and loss, were the disciples then able to celebrate and think of Easter as a marker, a season, a time of joy instead of sorrow. Yes, even in the season of death, that seems impossible to have any kind of marker or joy or hope or new life, God is always able to mark the season, even the season of death itself, with celebration through Jesus' resurrection and the new life that God creates. And so we will see at the end of this video, in our last reading, how Stephen, in Acts, recounts these markers throughout the people of God's history, because that's in part what he does. So friends in Christ, God is compassionate and faithful in creating markers of favor and grace for you, even in the most difficult times. So please don't lose hope, even as we lose our usual markers for the seasons of our lives right now. Trust, like the psalmist, that God is making new ones. I'll end by asking this. What new markers of time, new markers for the season that bring life, have you seen during this time of sickness and social distancing? What new markers have you seen God make in your life? For me, Thursday nights have become gaming night with my friend Ben. And it is bringing me great joy. And we may have created this time without the pandemic, but it sure seems as though the pandemic and all this social distancing has made us more mindful and focused on seeking out a new marker of time, a new way in which to engage this season together in a meaningful way to both of us that may not have happened otherwise. All right. On to Exodus 13:17-22. When Pharaoh let the people go, God did not lead them by way of the land of the Philistines, although that way was nearer. For God thought, if the people face war, they may change their minds and return to Egypt. So God led the people by the roundabout way of the wilderness toward the Red Sea. The Israelites went up out of the land of Egypt prepared for battle. And Moses took with him the bones of Joseph, who had required a solemn oath of the Israelites, saying, God will surely take notice of you, and then you must carry my bones with you from here. They set out from Succoth and camped at Etham, and on the edge of the wilderness. The Lord went in front of them in a pillar of cloud by day to lead them along the way, and in a pillar of fire by night to give them light, so that they might travel by day and by night. Neither the pillar of cloud by day nor the pillar of fire by night left its place in front of the people. Here ends the reading. So two things stand out for me here in this reading. Firstly, we have God creating physical markers, there's that word again, for the people to see in a new and scary season of their lives. Think about that. Yeah, they have just been freed from slavery, which is a great thing, but they have the bondage of fear of Pharaoh coming after them and killing them in mind right now. And so what does God do? God creates new markers in this new and scary and uncertain season. A pillar of cloud by day and a pillar of fire by night. And so again, we are reminded that God is faithful in giving us markers for the season we are in, whether we want to be in it or not. And this is especially true when we have lost the markers that we know. I mean, getting a little off script, but the Israelites complain in the Exodus, oh, we miss the flesh pots of Egypt and the onions and the leeks, and they remember back to the way things used to be, and they don't have those markers anymore. And so God continues to provide new markers, right? And these new markers that God gives them, gives us, gives you graciously, right? We are promised in this text they never leave us during the season that we're in, right? Quote, we read again, quote, neither the pillar of cloud by day nor the pillar of fire by night left its place in front of the people. The markers that God gives in our times, our seasons of uncertainty and being scared, they do not leave our side. They are there. And so that is, I hope, of great hope and peace to you. Secondly, the thing that stood out to me from this reading is this quote. So God led the people by the roundabout way of the wilderness toward the Red Sea. Thought to myself, the roundabout way. In today's day and age, we are a people that like things to come simply and in a straightforward way. Especially, this is especially true, if these simple and straightforward ways lead us back to the way things were, the way before, that were comforting and comfortable for us. If we can find a way back to the way things were that were comfortable and it's straightforward, that's called the path of least resistance. We jump on that path as quickly as we possibly can. If this is not true for you, God bless you for being unusual and different. But for most people, that path of least resistance back to the way things were that's comfortable, we slip right into that. And so God recognizes this about people, our tendency to just slip back into the way things were, even if they aren't necessarily good, but just familiar. When I say comfortable, it doesn't necessarily mean good. I mean, because the people lament. They're like, man, we knew what life was like when we were slaves. We knew we weren't going to die of thirst in the wilderness or die of hunger in the wilderness. We knew where our food would come from. We knew where our water would come from. It was something we understood. And so even though it was slavery, they still wanted to go back, right? God recognizes this about the people. And so God says, you know what? We need to take a roundabout way. Because, quote, the people may change their minds and return to Egypt. Right? Take away the path of least resistance back to the comfortable and familiar, so that the people can't change their minds and return. So as I read this verse about God leading in a roundabout way so that people don't return to life the way it was, this is what I wonder right now, with this being the way that God acts, or can act anyway. Might God be leading us right now in such a way that we cannot go back to the way things were? Right? God is leading us through a roundabout way. I mean, think about it. This pandemic has exacerbated so many of the problems that we have had in our society, both locally, nationally, and globally, that, quite frankly, we as human beings might put a Band-Aid on, might talk about a little bit, might kick it down the road a little bit, but we never really take the time to really dig into it deep and face these problems. And so now these problems are just huge and right in front of us, and we can't do anything but face them. Right? Things like hunger, mental health, healthcare accessibility, affordable housing, crowded schools, unfair accessibility to technology, and so much more. Right? Those are just some of those. And so, as we are forced right now, due to this pandemic, to slow down, to maintain social distancing, to actually think about how we inhabit a space that we're in, and reconstruct and think about our routines and our supply chains and the way we do things and how it might be safe and affect people, right? And we have to keep facing these problems that have been exacerbated due to this pandemic, and we seem to be trying to go back to a sense of normalcy in a very roundabout, unfamiliar way. Might God be leading us and working amongst us in such a way, like taking us on this roundabout way so that we can't We cannot go back to the way things were. And quite frankly, even though we have nostalgia and we like to think that things were always better the way they were before, oftentimes it really wasn't as great as we remember. Just like the Israelites and slavery, right? They longed for slavery. We look back at that and go, you're nuts. But that's how we are as human beings. So God leads us in roundabout ways, right? So might that be what God's doing right now? Something for you to ponder, right? My hope is that this is what God is doing. That God is leading in this way, working to bring new life, right? Bring us to a land flowing of milk and honey, to use the Exodus language. Especially for the ones that have never experienced that type of abundance in their life ever. And maybe as we seek to work together and recreate and reimagine society, that these people will finally be lifted up from the place that they've been pushed down into over and over and over and over again. All right, on to Acts chapter 7, verses 17 through 40. It's a pretty long chunk. Here we go. As the time drew near for the fulfillment of the promise that God had made to Abraham. Before I jump right into this is Stephen's speech. It's a continuation. It's right in the middle of it. He's recounting the history of God's people. Okay, starting over. But as the time drew near for the fulfillment of the promise that God had made to Abraham, our people in Egypt increased and multiplied, until another king who had not known Joseph ruled over Egypt, that is the Pharaoh. He dealt crafty with our race and forced our ancestors to abandon their infants so that they would die. At this time Moses was born, and he was beautiful before God. For 3 months he was brought up in his father's house, and when he was abandoned, Pharaoh's daughter adopted him and brought him up as her own son. So Moses was instructed in all the wisdom of the Egyptians and was powerful in his words and deeds. When he was 40 years old, it came into his heart to visit his relatives, the Israelites. When he saw one of them being wronged, he defended the oppressed man and avenged him by striking down the Egyptian, the taskmaster. He supposed that his kinsfolk, the Hebrews, the Israelites, would understand that God, through Moses, was rescuing them. But they did not understand. The next day he came to some of them as they were quarreling, that is, the Israelites, and tried to reconcile them, saying, "Men, you are brothers. Why do you wrong each other?" But the man who was wronging his neighbor pushed Moses aside, saying, "Who made you a ruler and judge over us? Do you want to kill me as you killed the Egyptian yesterday?" When Moses heard this, Moses fled and became a resident alien in the land of Midian. It's also known as a refugee. There he became the father of 2 sons. Now when 40 years had passed, an angel appeared to him in the wilderness of Mount Sinai in the flaming of a bush. When Moses saw it, he was amazed at the sight, and as he approached to look, there came the voice of the Lord. Quote, "I am the God of your ancestors, the God of Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob." Moses began to tremble and did not dare to look. Then the Lord said to him, "Take off the sandals from your feet, for the place where you are standing is holy ground. I have surely seen the mistreatment of my people who are in Egypt, and have heard their groaning, and I have come down to rescue them. Come now, I will send you to Egypt." It was this Moses whom they rejected when they said, "Who made you a ruler and a judge?" And whom God now sent as both ruler and liberator through the angel who appeared to him in the bush. He led them out, having performed wonders and signs in Egypt, at the Red Sea, and in the wilderness for 40 years. This is the Moses who said to the Israelites, "God will raise up a prophet for you from your own people, as he raised me up." He is the one who was in the congregation in the wilderness with the angel who spoke to him at Mount Sinai and with our ancestors, and he received living oracles to give us. Our ancestors were unwilling to obey him. Instead, they pushed him aside, and in their hearts they turned back to Egypt, saying to Aaron, "Make gods for us who will lead the way." As for this Moses who led us out of the land of Egypt, we do not know what has happened to him. So again, this is a speech from Stephen in the book of Acts, a follower of Jesus, what we consider the first Christian martyr. He's kind of been led before people who are accusing him of falsely of things he hasn't done in order to try and basically kill him and get him out of the way. And so Stephen says, well, no duh that you're doing this. You've done this to all the other people that God has elected. They've always complained and tried to get them out of the way and have it their own way, to return to slavery, if you will. Right? This is a part of your story. How come you don't see this? You did the same thing with Moses. You did the same thing with Jesus. You're going to do the same thing with me right now. For more details on this speech, I encourage you to see the May 8 video. I'm simply going to end this section in video by saying that, again, Stephen reminds us that when this world is topsy-turvy, upside down and sideways and confusing, and nothing seems to make much sense anymore, right? God has always provided signs and wonders that make God's presence known to us, if we simply just acknowledge them for what they are, right? And this happens even in our fear and doubt. God has created new markers of the season at hand, like a burning bush, and raising up new leaders like Moses, right? This is during the season of the Exodus. Those are the new markers that God made. And God did this to bring us, right, from our fears and sorrows to a new place. So we all long to be delivered from this season of discontent that we are living through right now. The promise of all the texts today is that God will lead us there. And on that note, again, I say peace be with you, and I will talk to you tomorrow.